Pippa, thanks for joining us today. I kind of sat in front of you a couple of weeks ago at the endurance European Endurance Conference, and everything you said was resonating very powerfully with me. And I think anyone that's listened to our podcast will know that we have a kind of a strong connection and passion towards helping people with energy deficiency or low energy availability. But anyway, I just thought it'd be a really great opportunity to kind of get him and have a conversation together. Love to find out more about what your background and share that with our community, and then also find out about what you're doing. So yeah, over to you. If it's all right. Just let us know what you're about and yeah, what you're doing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I've always been a fan of the work you do, and I suppose it's crazy it's taken this long to get on the podcast, but no, I'm pleased I am. Just by way of intro, I am a former GB cross-country runner and steeplechase athlete, and I guess I got into the sport at the amateur level, just at school, and very gradually worked up to a junior international level and then a senior international level. But it really wasn't all smooth sailing. And somewhere in between, I went off to the States for a scholarship in America, which I thought was like the dream come true. It was one of my big life goals. And I never really thought it would happen. And it did. And so I saw it as my chance to go all in with my running. It was a fairly short period of time because I'd already started a degree in Birmingham University in England, and I just transferred over. So instead of the typical 4 years in the States, I only had 2 years to get the most out of myself. And I suppose I really felt some pressure to do that. When I looked into all of the things that I thought would make me a better athlete, unfortunately, I zoomed in on my nutrition, which was the one thing I'd never ever touched before. It was something that came really naturally to me. I just ate a healthy balance of what I wanted and when I wanted. And I suppose it came with being the youngest of four really sporty siblings. And it was like a survival of the fittest approach to meal times. And it was like the more the better, really. And that was what had helped me fuel my athletics until this point. And then off I went to the States. I was in a completely new environment. As I say, felt some pressure both from myself and the institution, who were effectively paying me to be there and run as fast as I could. And I was surrounded by other female athletes who were very talented and very good at what they did, and a little bit older than me. And I really looked up to them, and they seemed to be doing all the right things. And unfortunately, one of those things that I now see wasn't quite right was a practice called clean eating, which we don't really hear that much anymore. But 10 years ago, when I was over there, this was something that was really encouraged and celebrated in the team environment. So it was essentially eating as bare minimum unhealthy foods, in inverted commas, as you can, and focusing on whole grains and vegetables and high fiber, low carb diet, I suppose. And obviously for an endurance athlete like myself, it was not ideal, but back then it seemed like the right thing to do because I saw those around me doing it, and they were also faster than me. They happened to be lighter than me, and I thought it was the right thing to do. And I did see some results to begin with of this new refined diet. I ran a bit quicker. I lost a bit of weight. People were praising my new athletic physique, and I think I felt as though I looked the part. And over time, I began to care more about looking the part than actually performing the part. And I saw my performances start to plateau, and I wasn't able to see that part of that was because of the diet that I was adopting, just being too refined and not enough calories to match the energy I was expending through my training. And unfortunately, it led to this whole host of adverse health consequences, frequent illness, frequent injuries that I'd never struggled with previously. And then it affected my mental health. I got quite low in my mood. I was irritable. I was homesick, which all was really unlike me. And I or no one else in my support team was ever able to put the pieces of this puzzle together and track it back to my diet, because we all thought I was doing exactly what I needed to be the best I could be. So that's a bit of a brief summary, and we can delve into whatever you want to there, but I'm sure it's not something you've ever heard before.
Oh no, it's fascinating, isn't it? When back then, when when you're talking about those behaviors, the you can't help but move into those high performance environments, and you obviously just start to mimic what other people are doing around you because you think that's innocently what is meant to be. And but if there's no accountability or education in place, it's like, well, who says? Like, what's the? I mean, I presume this is all coming off the back of just literally being around other fellow like boys and well, young men and women, I suppose, who are aspiring towards the same goals. Right? Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though I was in one of the best running distance running universities in the country, and we did have a healthcare team around us, it just wasn't adequate for that level of performance and pressure. And we had a nutritionist, but I probably wouldn't have listened to them, to be honest, because my peers were more of an influence over me than the professionals, I guess.
You can't ever think immediately like how could you enter into a program like that, and this is we know it's happening, it happens in multiple different sports, but how can you enter into a program like that where the expectations are so high, but then the basics aren't being catered for, literally catered for, like your nutrition, your recovery, your blood work. I mean, I presume none of this was being looked at along the way. I don't know.
No, exactly right. So when I came into the program, we did have a health check, and that would have covered the bases in terms of the basic blood tests. And then, we had things like concussion tests, which were completely irrelevant for a distance running event. But, I suppose the boxes were ticked, but actually nothing really went below the surface level of health, which when you're training at that level and pushing your body so hard, you do need to think a little bit outside the box in terms of what health looks like.
How old were you? Can I ask?
I was 19 when I went over there, so still very much developing, and actually at quite an influential point in my mental development and athletic maturity, but especially when it came to being influenced by others.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of us at that age, or every single one of us, no matter whether you're athletic or not, it's that kind of those are the years where you're trying to work out which direction's best to head in, and you're putting a lot of energy into your passions. And obviously for you, as you're just blinkered, right? You're thinking, how good can I be? How good can I be? How quick can I get? And someone says that you could, if you're a little bit lighter, and you'll get a bit faster. And it takes one word, it takes one image. And I don't know, look, you talked about your body type, and obviously body image being a massive thing. I mean, your particular somatotype, your body type, you're a tall woman. I mean, it's like comparisons, and obviously, depending on who you're surrounded with, if you're comparing yourself with someone who's smaller in stature, someone who's lighter and thinner or whatever, it's that it's very powerful environments to be in. And if you're not talking to someone about it, if you're not having a quality sounding board around you that's kind of managing your mindset, you can see how it unravels so quickly, right?
For sure. And when you're mingling in both sports circles and then normal societal circles, and in one, you're the absolute epitome of what we might define as the athletic aesthetic, and in another, you don't quite make the cut. It's really quite hard to get the right perspective on the way you look and how much that matters. And I remember people saying to me as I was growing up, things like, you look like a runner, or I can tell you're a distance runner, and things. And what does that actually mean? When I reflect back on that now, was that a healthy thing for me to hear, or did that lead to this comparison to others standing on the start line of my races?
You talked about isolation there, and like a lot of this is about identity already. You said that your behaviors are changing. Like I'm already hearing things that I've become comfortable with because of my wife Polly, and obviously our kind of our own personal journey, her navigating her own Red S journey, and from being training full time, and so many similarities, so many correlations here with like, you can understand why some people get very isolated as athletes. They just train and just they work and train or study and train, and because it becomes more insular, right? You, as you say, like you don't know which way what's best to be, so you end up just focusing on just training and just and that's again, it's not a healthy environment to be in because it's like the best athletes I've ever worked with are the ones that probably have the best balance. Like they have that
Mm.
ability to disengage from their training at the best time. They can eat randomly at times, and those that haven't are the ones that can't let go. They are completely and utterly fixated, and it's just that identity, isn't it? That piece. But how I don't know. There's so much there. Like, how much did you change, and then how did you work your way back from that place? Mentally, like, and socially, and
Mm.
etc. I mean, there's a lot there, isn't there? But I don't know if you can break that down a bit.
For sure. Just to your point there on, people that have the best balance, I think what's such a shame is that in the media, especially, we see this celebration of hard work and no one really talks about the other stuff in life. And I remember as a child even or a teenager who was developing in the sport and hungry to maximize my potential, I would read articles and autobiographies and things, and it would all be about how much work you can do compared to everybody else. And now I think we're seeing a shift towards talking about working smarter, not harder. But certainly, I think there's a way to catch up. We've got a long way to go with that, and it's such a shame because yeah, you have the inside scoop on like the best athletes do have other things in life, and they do have a better perspective on when to back off. But that's just not what trickles down to the less elite athletes, and it's yeah, it's a shame to see that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, go on.
No, I don't know. I don't know if it doesn't even have to be elite. I don't think like it's just best the the best achieving or the best people that are the most consistent people that I've worked with. I think that's even a better way of saying it. The people that are seemingly less injury prone, the people that are able to consistently perform as well as they want to, have that ability to let go or to like switch off or to say no to a session or to eat a bit better, like eat a bit random, like not be so calculated in their behavior all the time. I think it doesn't even need to be elite sometimes. I think sometimes it's just they have that they've developed that skill. It's a skill they've always it's a quality they've always had. I don't know. I think, but they certainly had that ability to. Okay, I can let that go. I can let that slide. And those that can't are often the ones that are. They think that's the best way, but actually, it's the quickest way to burn out, to overtraining, whatever it is. I think so. I always want to squash that up sometimes. Sometimes that elitist because it's
Yeah.
not elitist. It's just because most people
No.
want to train consistently, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what bothers me is that, it's the elite athletes that are the role models. And I'm sure many of them are actually really balanced because that's what helped them to become at, the top of their game. But the media and others, I suppose, don't celebrate enough the fact that there is rest, there is flexibility, there is, this listening to your body thing rather than just pushing harder and harder than everybody else. And yeah, I think, some people have that and other people are perhaps a bit more A-type with their personality, and whether, that's in work or in sport or in life, it's not always healthy to be an extreme of anything.
Everyone's making mistakes the whole way along, and I think it's those that are able to kind of are able to like learn from those mistakes along the way. And some people just they're not even aware they're making mistakes, as you say. Like I think that's one of the hardest things about Red S. A lot of times people just keep going, and you said like you see positive results from your poor behaviors, right? Like
Mm.
as you say, like you're doing better, you're getting faster, you're maybe going further, like, and then suddenly what they're not aware of is that catastrophic fallout. And it's maybe physical. A lot of the time it is physical, but then a lot of it's mental, isn't it? It's social. Like it's you're a completely different person. But I that's without doubt the biggest thing we work with is in the endurance space is that you can keep going. These behaviors you can keep working with
Yeah.
with an injury. You can keep working with poor behavior. You just slow down a bit. You just adjust a
Mm.
bit. You just but
Yeah.
and you erode away, erode away, erode away, and then suddenly and that's, I mean, that is energy. That's what we're dealing with, right? It's that people don't really realize they're in this place, especially with contraception and things. They don't realize that they're even. Well, we didn't know. We had no idea about poly for a long time, and then it was only when we decided we wanted to start having children that we realized, oh wow, okay, poly was
Yeah.
poly's been way off the grid for probably years, and we didn't even realize. So it's not fair. But that's the thing, like you don't even know you're making mistakes until, well, until you have a blood test maybe, or you want, or you use your menstrual cycle as a pulse read kind of thing. Were you on
Yeah.
personal? I mean, were you on contraception at the time when when you were over there? Yeah.
Sadly, yes. And the reason I went on in the first place was because I wanted to find a way to tailor my period around my competition. And the best way that I thought was to go on the pill. And that's what everyone else was doing. And that's what was encouraged even by the medical profession. So, we're catching up very slowly when it comes to awareness that the menstrual cycle is a crucial female function and should never be masked by something like the pill, which takes away that natural process and produces a synthetic replacement. But I didn't know that, and no one around me knew that. So I was lulled into a false sense of security that I did have a period because I had this withdrawal bleed that is induced by the pill. But of course, that wasn't a period at all. It was just a synthetic substitute.
And that is it's a hard. I mean, it's a complex conversation to have with any woman, female, man or woman, essentially. But around pros and cons of being on contraception, right? Being in relationships, wanting to form a relationship, like wanting to be a person, be a woman, have a social life, but then
Yeah.
also them dialing down on being the best athlete potentially you want to be, and like, okay, what are the variables that I need to be managing or considering, and having,
Yeah.
some women it's not traumatic, but it's hard, it's hard work every month when when your cycle comes around, and it's kind of, yeah. I mean, I still wouldn't say I know exactly. There isn't. I don't believe there is an answer, because I think there is a, for every person, every woman, there's going to be a different answer, because I think it's their decision at the end of the day. But when you are dialing down on those things, it's like, okay, well, where's your health at? And
Mm.
what are we looking at? And I think a lot of people don't even know what their health looks like, as in their blood health, their hormonal health. Not knowing
Yeah.
that before you then go on to contraception, like, I think knowing that before you then maybe go into contraception would be a great step, and then knowing what your nutrition looks like, and managing your training load whilst on contraception. But I don't think those questions are even being asked. People are just on contraception, and then training load and volumes and intensities are placed on top of that, and people are being trained unknowing. You get no idea what this person looks like underneath.
No, and it is such a shame because I think we're programmed as females to really kind of fear the menstrual cycle and almost want to get rid of it or to manipulate it. Where instead, if we were able to learn how to work with it and to maximize our training at various stages of the cycle and then perhaps back off at other phases, we would all arguably be much better athletes and much healthier athletes and therefore perform better for longer. And yeah, it's such a shame that we aren't having this conversation more broadly. And you're right, there isn't an answer. It's, one person might choose the pill and that is perfect for them because if they know that at any given time they can come off the pill and the chances are they will menstruate and they will have an ovulation and they will be able to start a family if that's what they choose to do. But for someone else, someone like me, perhaps, I would have benefited from having a non-hormonal form of contraceptive because then I would have known what I was working with, rather than being blind to it, as you say.
Education, right at the heart of all of this. I mean, this is what your project Red S. I'm very intrigued by. I've been looking at this for the last couple of weeks now, and education. I can't, like, the last 10 plus years of becoming far more aware of it, obviously because of our personal circumstances, and then obviously moving into the space and having hundreds of conversations now with women of all ages, and and men, and we'll talk about men later on. But like, education, like, we've been through it. Like, I've been forced to understand it. I've got my sports science background, and I've got training qualifications, and I've gone to multiple conferences and spoken to people like yourself, and we've sat in front of multiple health experts, etc., about medication. So, and then working with people like Rini over the years, and Nikki Kay and things like that. Like, it's, there's a wealth there. But then it's easy for me to say this, but then if you look at all the other coaches around the country, around the world, like, is the education there at a national governing body level? Like, No. Like, is it being taught from a grassroots level up? No. Like, and I think that's what I'd love to explore with you in a bit, actually, is like conversation, communication around this topic, because it's a hard, it can be, I mean, it's a very hard, I mean, even for me now in this podcast, I'm thinking, right, my language, like, how do I word things appropriately? Because I don't want to sound like an ignorant idiot, sort of thing. So yeah, it's hard, isn't it? But education, I think. Would you mind talking about Project Red S a little bit, or?
Yeah, for sure. And as you say, it's really hard and it's complex and complicated, but at its core, it's such a simple issue. It really is an issue of energy intake versus expenditure, but it is nuanced and there are different considerations for different individuals, and that's what makes it tricky. And I think, yeah, you're right. Coaches especially lack the education. Parents even, don't know how to have these discussions with their young athletes growing up, and therefore we're all just kept in the dark. But yeah, so after my own experience with the condition, I began mentoring other people because not even intentionally, but people would have heard what I'd experienced and how I'd sort of tried to overcome it. And I was quite open about it. I talked to like Athletics Weekly and Runner's World, and they were interested in it. And people would approach me and say, oh, my daughter's experiencing the same thing, or what's your advice on who to go and see about it? And I was just frustrated with this lack of connection between people experiencing the problem and the specialists who can help them. And I felt like I was just this signposting machine where I'd have to say, okay, I think you'd benefit from seeing this person, and you definitely need to get your hormones tested, and you definitely need to look into your bone density and all of this. And so I thought I might as well set up a website. And thankfully, my husband's a software engineer, so that was pretty easy for him. And together, and like you, we were going through this as a couple. It was just as hard for him as it was for me. And so he was passionate about doing something to try to make change happen. And so was I. So we set up the website, and it just grew from there because the hunger for this education and this access to support resources is there. And people found their way to the website. I didn't really do any marketing or outreach. It was just grew organically. And yeah, I suppose the main aim is awareness, to increase awareness. And we do that via talks with the media. Several publications are hopefully taking this on and trying to shine a spotlight on it. Then prevention by providing tried and trusted information, trying to simplify the data and the science into something that's understandable for lay people and, people who aren't wanting to look into a research paper, and then providing support for the people who are struggling already or whose loved ones are struggling. And that might look like psychology, it could look like nutrition and medicine, or even mentoring, which is what I provide myself, but I'm by no means a medical expert, and I'm not interested in becoming a dietitian or a nutritionist. I'm much more happy to refer people to those resources, but it's just I guess a hub for people to come to if they're struggling.
Love it. I think it's still massively needed. Like, I think even 10, what are we talking, 10 years down the line from your, yeah, I mean, we're 10, 15 years down the line for both, are probably both different scenarios. And I was literally talking to you off the mic here. I was saying how, like, there's a couple of different scenarios we're dealing with right now where young, old, like, different environments where we're working out as a team the best avenues to support our clients, or our individuals. And it's not clear. It's not a clear cut pathway. Like, there's general health, GP kind of referrals. Like, as I said, in the nicest possible way, it's a litmus test as to know how much they do that. How's that system gonna help them? Are they gonna be sitting in front of someone who understands the scenario, the situation? Um, are we sending them to a specific psychologist, a specific dietitian? Is it just, disordered eating? Is it eating disorder? There's so many, is it an innocent thing? Like, I mean, this is what I think I'd love to explore with you again, is this whole, this concept of where a lot of people innocently fall into Red S. And then there's obviously other people who potentially have situations around them. There's trauma, there's, like, there's things that have happened that actually it's much deeper than just training. Training is just a simple mechanism, and I've been in the presence of multiple aspects of that across that whole range where it's a quick fix. It's a hey, you're not eating enough. Let's just adjust things. Oh yeah, okay, great, boom, and period comes back, and it's the other end of that spectrum. It's actually training isn't what you need to focus on. It's we need there's deeper work here. There's more work, personal development work. There's emotional work there. There's and that's again, but again, the spectrum is wide. It's a very very wide spectrum, and anything that can help support that, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, you're right. That's the main challenge is that it can be a recreational 50-year-old who has got into cycling and loves to go out with their friends and doesn't necessarily stop to have a snack and maybe doesn't have breakfast beforehand and just simply innocently falls into a state of low energy availability, which when maintained can lead to red S. And then it could be a very quick conversation. Okay, you need to be eating something before you're exercising, and throughout your exercise, you need to be fueling. And then for someone else, it could be driven by the need to eat less and do more. And that's much trickier. So there has to be provision of resources for everyone. And that's where we've not been connecting the dots. The science is there, the medical professionals are out there, the dietitians are out there, but no one is really connecting them. And I understand that, it's a tricky job.
Yeah, I, I think there's a real need for Project Red S right now, in the sense of like where can you go to have, well, as I said, be signposted, like literally have a better conversation, and to be then facilitate the direction you're going, because sometimes you don't need full on psychological evaluation. It's just actually you just need to kick up the arse, and you just need to actually, hey, heads up, you're not eating enough. Like you're doing way too much because you love it, and you need to just real no, it's a rejig of their training program, and maybe they're just self coaching themselves, and they're following a plan, the same nutrition they were following 10 years ago, and it's not enough. So yeah, no, I think yeah, and again, it starts with conversation. It starts with that conversation, doesn't it? Like, okay, where are we at? What are we working with here? Like what's the why behind your training? Like what's the why? And I think that can tell you a lot. So like when it comes to the mentoring, the counseling or mentoring, um, communication. How, I mean, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. Like if you're talking to coaches, let's say, because I think you've got coaches, you've got parents, you've got the athletes potentially. I think there's some different populations there we could target in terms of better communication. But I'm a male coach talking to a group of young women up at the track. I'm track athletes or middle-aged women, or like how best ways to kind of break down that conversation, start that conversation.
I would say as soon as you can and as directly as you can. And I think you want to become as informed as you can first. So you want to have read up on it from a credible source and know your stuff before you then question. I think questioning is the most important thing. And maybe that needs to be in a confidential setting if it's someone you're already concerned about. But maybe it could be something as broad as, has everyone got their snack for after training? Have you all got your drink even? Because hydration is important too. And I think we're trying to create a culture of open conversation and not shying away from topics like menstruation, which is, as we've discussed, the most basic female function, which has historically been a taboo topic. It's something that males struggle to discuss because of history. But we need to be moving on from that. It's something that should be in every coach athlete conversation, in my opinion. And ideally, that should start at the beginning of the coach relationship, when someone comes to you and says, can I be coached by you, or can I take part in your training program? You can say, sure. Can I ask about your menstrual health history? Because why not? It's a huge part of being a female and being a female athlete.
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, it's been part of our communication, like our initial conversations from well, again, since year dot, I think, if I'm honest. And and you approach it in different ways. It doesn't have to be blunt and black and white. It can be, like sometimes we may approach it widely, if we're talking to the group. But when you're first working with someone, yeah, absolutely, it's as simple as, do you have a regular cycle at the moment? Are you on contraception? It's just start that conversation, and often the conversation just carries on organically. And I was talking to a couple of coaches recently, and they were asking like best ways to go about it, and I actually just said it's almost like group learning, as you say, like nutrition, talk about it openly to the group, but then also like have open discussions about the importance of hormones and things, and actually you almost create those little moments where people can then give you feedback and actually, oh, that resonated with me, or you're kind of creating these little opportunities for the conversation to carry on out in private. So instead of having to like make it not, there's no, you don't have to directly ask it sometimes, because
No.
I still struggle to do that decades later,
Mm.
and I'd like to think I'm pretty comfortable with this topic, but I still don't like to meet it head on sometimes, because it's just, you still don't know the right words sometimes when you're working with people. So yeah.
No, no, and I think it's the same for the female athletes. They struggle to bring it up too, and between us all, it's just something we are not talking about enough. And I even think for males, we should be checking in on males and their mental health and their physical health, and it doesn't have to be menstrual cycle focused entirely. We can be asking our athletes, how are your energy levels? How is your nutrition? Do you think you need any extra support with any aspect of your health and well-being?
Yeah, you can see it without. I mean, again, these are symptoms on this. I think, like, what are the signs? Should we say, like, it doesn't have to be a menstrual cycle first, because you might not have a clue about what that looks like to start. But it's as say, eating behaviors, training behaviors, what their training week looks like. What their relationship is like with recovery and food. Yeah, you can see it almost before you need to ask those types of questions.
Yeah. And sometimes people might not want to talk about their menstrual health, and it might not be even relevant to them. They might feel as though that's not important to them, but they might feel that their performance is, or that their energy levels are, or that their bone health is. And that can sometimes be your as a coach, to have a conversation. And I remember, when I was 19 and I was put on the pill, I didn't think twice about it. I couldn't have cared less, about whether, it might impact my bone health in later life. I didn't know that, but if I had been told that, I probably wouldn't have cared anyway, because at that age, all I cared about was my short-term performance and my athletic physique. So yeah, it's a broader conversation, but I think if you can get some intel as a coach or anyone who works with an athlete about their menstrual health, it's very valuable.
I think that's an important thing to talk about, and I don't like to dwell on it too much, but the severity of the situation is absolute. Like, we've unfortunately, I've worked with young women, especially, who've had, screws in their neck of the femur, in their leg, and they're having to rehabilitate that back. They've had multiple surgeries, multiple, stress fractures, and they're 20 something. They're in the, and they're osteoporotic already, and it's only come from a very intense athletic career. Like, and like, when you go back into their history, it's come from a hell of a lot of training load, very naive, ignorant approach to even asking any questions around nutrition, recovery, and their relationship with training. It's just been go. It's just been more, lighter, 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 faster, faster, faster. But that the severity is, as you say, it's bones, bone stress injuries has never been, I don't know if there are so many more than people talk about. I don't, and I couldn't articulate what the percentages are within the endurance community, but stress responses through the stress fractures, like there are, it's almost like not a badge of honor, but a lot of people have had variations of that injury. And why? Chronic overtraining, under fueling, under recovery, like, poor training load management, like lack of strength conditioning, like, it's all of the above, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah. And I think you're right. It's so common that it is normalized. It's something that, because everybody is experiencing it, you're not typically that alarmed when you're the one getting a stress fracture. And like, I won't name the athlete, but I was so shocked and saddened by this recent article I read following the marathon in the Paris Olympics. And there was a British runner who ran the marathon and had a bone stress injury during the event and following the event. And the media chose to like celebrate it and talk about, you know, what a heroic act of endurance, and, you know, wow, this athlete can push through pain and like finish a marathon. And I'm sitting there reading this in utter disbelief that in 2024 we haven't got ahead of the fact that bone stress injuries are not normal and absolutely are not healthy. And we're still so far behind in terms of awareness that bone stress injuries are related to nutrition and overtraining. And yeah, you know, maybe few of them are caused by biomechanical structural imbalances, but for the most part, you don't get a best bone stress injury for no reason.
There is an underlying ignorance in this. I mean, I've spoken about it enough on the podcast, but I can speak openly, and this is my opinion. But there is a incredible ignorance towards it, where it's just, so what? Let's get them to the best they can be, and if they fall to the wayside, let's keep going. And obviously, we work within the triathlon space, and there's a few people right now in the top of the game who are on the sidelines for interesting injuries that are remarkably symptomatic of bone stress injuries, but aren't being labelled them. And it's like there's a fine line of optimal performance. Obviously, you know, in terms of body composition, strength to weight ratio, you know, building towards, you know, elite performance. It's a fine line, but how often that person is falling into those zones of, you know, injury, or so if someone's played with injury or sickness or illness or is not really ever kind of fulfilling their potential, no one's ever looking back and going, actually, this person is under fueling, overtraining, under recovering. But because the education is still terrible. Like I still see, I get triggered by a couple of particular coaches who are seen as the greats, the you know the all-time greats. For every one person that they're successful with, I'm terrified to know how many have fallen to the wayside, broken, and like who are potentially walking around osteoporotic or osteopenic because for the rest of their life, because they were trained with an umbrella approach and probably never asked to look at their bloods, ever looked at their nutrition. It was just, no, everyone's doing it. You can do it. You'll be all right. Or you need to look this way, or you need to weigh this much. It triggers me beyond belief, Pip. I can't tell you. I like being able to talk like this because it's the biggest. It is one of the biggest gaps that we see in this industry, in this community. Yeah. So
Crazy. Isn't it crazy? It still shocks me every day. And I work in the field that like there are still people who are so far behind and being praised for what they do. And I think like one thing that is such a shame is that we aren't we aren't like identifying that there is another way, and we're not playing the long game. And like if I think to my own personal example of starting out the sport with, you know, enthusiasm and enjoyment and passion and some level of talent, and the gradual progression I made over the years and would have continued to make if I hadn't tried to find a shortcut, or not even intentionally, but if I hadn't made the mistake of thinking that lighter was faster, where would I be now? Like, what future would have been ahead of me for the
I would have
long term?
I would have loved, from my coaching point of view, with you. I'm like, you know, and I'm no elite steeplechase coach, but I would have loved to have made sure that you're doing, like, you have a good relationship with nutrition. We know how much you need to be, like, you know, your energy expenditure versus your energy intake, like knowing what you're roughly eating on a day to week basis, and that it correlates with how much volume and intensity you're suddenly now doing more of. Like, you're doing regular strength and conditioning. We have a good understanding of your blood and hormonal health. Like we do a blood check, a performance blood check every what 6 months, 3 months, I don't know, like just periodically enough. And then obviously just checking in with you and going, hey, where you at? What you struggling with? Like, are we good? You know, like I don't think that's difficult. Really don't. I think that's not high performance. That's just performance training. Like if you're going into a program, and this is what we offer at SFE, like it's what we do now. It's like, right, no guesswork. We need to know what your bloods look like at some point because we just want to know that we can do more with you. And if we don't know what
Yeah.
that looks like, then let's work it out. Or if we don't know what their nutrition looks like, okay, let's get on top of that. Like, I don't think it needs to be that complicated, but this is taking
No,
no.
we don't need to overanalyze it. We don't need to track the metrics to the ninth degree. We can just look at the bigger picture and make sure that we're covering the bases. And I suppose if I think back to like the diet I had when I was 16 and the training program I had when I was 16, I think, oh my God, if I wish I'd just maintained it and like made some gradual progression each year. It's such a shame that we think that there is only one way to the top, and that is sacrifice when it doesn't need to be.
Do you think though, like it's that confusion? I think you said about performance mindset, social mindset. Like it's that confusion where like you're training as an athlete, but you're eating like a
Mm.
what should we call it? A sedentary woman, a woman that doesn't train. Like so, you've got two split mindsets, and so but when you combine those two, it's dangerous because you're not doing enough. You're not thinking in the right way in the sense that you need to be fueling for performance to a certain degree, but you need to be recovering for performance. So you need to be doing enough. But I think that's probably you back then. Maybe I don't know. Like that was because it's you didn't have that mindset.
Mm.
I didn't know what you know now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think comparison is one of the biggest traps to fall into because when you're moving between those circles, and let's say as an athlete, I ate an adequate amount, but in my social group where I wasn't surrounded by athletes, they would have thought, oh my God, you eat so much, and they might have commented, whoa, you eat so much. And that gets in your head. So when I then think about my diet, I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe I'm eating too much. But actually, for an athlete, it might not have even been enough.
I often say like in the nicest possible way, you're not a normal person. You're not a normal woman. You're not a normal man.
Hmm.
Like I'm saying this from the kindest place of kindness, but normal like the average person doesn't want to run a 10K every of an evening or go out on a 2 hour bike ride or do a 5K swim set or do multiples of that on a weekly basis, and it's so their energy requirements are much less. So it's that expectations, right? Our expectations are much greater. If you want to be a highly active person, your expectations are greater, and so as a result, you need to be doing a bit more than the average person. And I never want to like belittle anyone or any group. It's just the way it is, right? Higher energy output, you need a higher energy input, but it's hard. If you imagine being in an office environment, and you're sat there and you're all having dinner, having lunch, and you've already had mid-morning snack and a smoothie, and then you're sitting down and your lunch is bigger than the other person's, and then you're going to have a mid-afternoon snack and shake or whatever, and then you might have a pre-training session snack, and they're like they they can't quantify it, but they don't need to. You need to. Do
No,
you know what I mean?
right. Yeah. And what is tough is that they may well comment, and
Mhm.
you have to be informed enough to know not to let that get in your head. But when you're young and impressionable, especially, that does get in your head. It's so hard.
Oh, 30, 40 years old, you're still bloody hard. Like I was talking to a friend the other day, like, he is in the office and he said he's a friend who and he finds it hard. He literally eats under the desk almost because he doesn't want to like deal with that. And he's a 40-year-old man, father, he think he hasn't got, he doesn't give two monkeys, but he does. Like, so empowerment, like it's that you've got the education, like why? And again, I think for me, I personally, it comes back to education. I mean, we talk about it as openly as we possibly can within our program because it's just like why are they going on about eating? Got to eat more, or you got to hydrate more, or actually we need you to do less so you can recover more, etc. Because it's just a long game, as you say, like you said earlier on, it's the long game, isn't it?
Yeah, and that education needs to be coming from different angles. Your parents need to be aware of how to handle the conversation and how to encourage you to match the demands of your training with your nutrition. Your coach needs to be somewhat aware of whether you're turning up to training well fueled and why you might be getting injured and ill. And then, whichever healthcare professionals or member of your support system you choose to work with, they need to know too. And like when you said earlier about going to a GP, it being complete potluck as to whether they are informed, and through no fault of their own, we just lack GP awareness in the issue because in the grand scheme of the population, athletes or people who exercise, are not typical. As you say, they're not normal, but GPs don't know about this issue. And so how would they know how to have the conversation? How would they know how to recognize the connection between all of the different elements?
I've worked with gynecologists, dietitians, GP, general practitioners, consultants, physios. I've worked with a lot over the years, and it's just they're not. That's just elements of their own education or their qualifications that they weren't. They're just not. They're not up to date with everything, and it's okay. But it's not okay if you're sat in front of that person and you're getting generic advice, and then you're taking that as gospel, and then nothing's changing. You're not getting the help you need. So it is important. I mean, that's why we talk about these performance blood tests and actually getting your hormone, actually getting, and then getting this information and then having that actually kind of tailored to you. So we know in terms of like what are the best kind of interventions that you could be doing in changes that you could be doing, and it matters. It does matter where that information comes from, where that advice comes from, because everyone's so unique. Everyone's got different environment situations, but as I said, it comes down to education, doesn't it?
Yeah. And what I find crazy is that because of the lack of awareness and understanding of the topic, athletes themselves might not be willing to fork out, what, 100 quid for a full blood panel because, they don't think it's necessary, but they'd spend that on half of, double that on a pair of trainers. And we need to be educating everyone on the importance of this.
What does it take to have consistent health and consistent performance? And if you want to have, I mean, I try and dress it up in so many different ways because obviously I'm trying to sell the performance. I want someone to be happy, healthy, and injury free for us forever. But to do that, you got to be aware of what good recovery looks like, good nutrition looks like, good psychology looks like, good physiology or blood health, but then also good training. Like, what is an appropriate amount of training for you on top of all your life and your work and your other commitments? And I, those are the elements that just training's easy bit. I always say like training's easy, like being like, and it can sound a bit ignorant, but like it is like giving someone lots of training to do. Go, let's do more. Okay, great. Go faster. Great. Let's work on those split times. That's great. What's not easy? What's like, and everyone, I think, there's a lot of people will be uncomfortable. It's like, hey, what's your menstrual cycle like this week? This month. What's your nutrition look like? Are you struggling? Like, are we eating enough? Like that. That's the hard bit. Like, what do your bloods look like? Do you know what your hormones you on contraception? These are the things that people just literally are like, I've got no idea. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Training is the easiest part of being an athlete. Resting and balance is the most elusive. And yeah, we will. I'd love to have some really good studies into like the people who perform at the top of sport for the longest time. Like Roger Federer. Does he eat chocolate? I'm sure he does. I'm sure he puts his feet up and plays video games. Like we don't need to only talk about how many hours he spends on the tennis court. We also need to talk about what he does for downtime.
well, from my point of view, obviously, it's like the strength and conditioning habits they've always had. They've always done some form of strength and conditioning, or they've come from a background where they were doing a lot of it, or their sport was multi kind of. They used to train in multi planes of motion, etc., or they like whatever, and then. But then they've also always had a pretty sound relationship with nutrition. Oh yeah, I just eat because
Yeah.
I intuitively eat enough, and you're like, do you realize how hard that is for people? Like some people, it's not that easy. Like it's yeah, within the ultra space, you've got people like Courtney Dauwalter and things like that who are just phenoms. Like she's so blasé about how she does what she does, and it's like I just love. I want people to unpack that a little bit just to show people what it really has taken to be able to do what she does. Like an athletic background, I think track and field, football. Like she was an athlete before she was in a runner. She was in college. She did. There's like an education there, an understanding of sport that isn't showcased. She just runs 200 miles for fun, and it's like, yeah, but with what? Like, like she knows herself better than like anyone. But how does she know that? And yeah, I said it's a romantic relationship with endurance training of any type that people just kind of they just get drawn into and they just think, I just got to do more. I've just got to do more training. And you're like, no, like there's
Mm.
all these other elements that you've got to be working on. Your psychology, I think your Project Red S, if you're, in terms of giving people a hub to go to have to have that mentoring there, like that, and just that education and that support, I think that is probably the most important thing, right, to start with, because I I had to witness it as a partner, as a husband, like Holly working it out, and we've been quite open about it, but it took us a long time to work it out. Like in all honesty, like we didn't have the education in front of us. We don't these types of conversations weren't being had. It took us, we went down the rabbit hole different ways. We had
Yeah.
hormone treatment and etc. And it was like, no, completely
Yeah.
overtraining.
Exactly. Yeah, like I think what's crazy is that so many of us want to believe that there is some deep-rooted underlying problem with our anatomy or our, metabolic system when we're overlooking the most obvious cause because we're not having the conversation. And I too, I underwent brain scans and serious like ultrasounds on my ovaries and loads of like complex medical testing that must have cost the NHS a fortune
Yeah.
because my endocrinologist had no idea that being on the pill was masking a natural menstrual cycle.
Yeah. We spent hundreds going up onto the Gold Coast in Australia when we were training over there, and they were, on Clomid and hormone treatment, and then we'll go and sit down in front of a GP, and they'll say, "Oh my goodness, your hormone levels are through the roof," and we're like, "Yeah, but she's on hormone treatment," and they're like, "No, no,
Yeah.
it must be something else." Just a absolute mismatch of like education, understanding, like not really understanding the bigger picture, and underlying the in not to ever simplify it, but the simple thing was that doing too much with too little. Like it was like we were doing far too much training and not respecting the fact that you were completely under fueling and and that was something that we took a long time to. And obviously for us, it was working with Rena McGregor, working with Dr. Nikki Kay. Like we were very lucky to have spent a number of years being in the same practice together, training together, working together. That gives me, that allows me to have this level of insight and confidence in this space. But we didn't know it, and we had to learn it. But I don't believe it's that. I believe it should be everywhere. Like it should be literally be. And I think we look at some of the research, and the research is, as you said, but that's unbelievably alienating and confusing. And then at the other end, we've got ignorance where people are just kind of getting on with them. But I feel like Project Red S is it's right where it needs to be. Like it needs right in the middle there, where it's like facilitating. We don't need more dietitians as such. What we need is better communication. Would that be
Mm-hmm.
fair?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And if you have any ideas about how to increase exposure, that's what we need next. But like, yeah, you're right. We've got the medical specialists, we've got the dietitians, we've got the data and the understanding on a scientific level, but we need the conversation on the ground. We need the awareness and education embedded at the grassroots level across parents, across coaches, at everyone that works with athletes from day one of their entry into sport, and that's what we're lacking. And I remember when I was diagnosed with this condition, like even then, I still didn't know how to go about recovery because I was learning all this from scratch. Had I learned in my early adolescence the importance of my menstrual cycle, at least I would have been able to get my head around that as a concept. But instead, after sort of 5 years of struggling along with something I didn't understand, I had to figure it out on my own, completely like you guys in the dark about all of it. And that's really tough.
And so the only reason we were, confidently moved past it was because of sports science background and maybe a logical kind of mindset that we had, and the social network we had around us, or professional network that we as well built around the gym, with us in Australia and then in Bath and in the UK. But yeah, like but it's not, and that's obviously what at SFE, that's what we organically want to produce for everyone that comes through our pathway or works with us. Is you don't have to be Red S or struggling with it, but it's certainly a consideration if someone wants to train a lot, and they've got big aspirations of 100K ultras or Ironmans or whatever it is. Okay, energy availability is a major thing we need to be considering. Managing your training load, eat enough, recover enough, blood work if we need to. Like it's just part of the narrative. It has to be. It just has to be. And obviously different phases of life, going through those different. I mean, there's always a bit of complexity to it, but better conversation. I think that is exactly what's still lacking right now. Is that we were in a room full of coaches the other day, and when you were presenting, I would I would challenge most of that, but most of that group in there, I would say they would struggle to articulate this type of conversation with their audience, and I know that for a fact because there was five other people around me that literally when we came into a huddle together, that was the topic of how best to approach it, best kind of words to use, conversation, and it's hard. It's I said it's on the ground, and again, national governing bodies, England Athletics, British Triathlon, US Triathlon, whatever. You could go into all those NGBs and go, you're teaching it maybe, but are you then integrating it on the ground? Like, are you really empowering coach and athlete and parents? Don't know.
Yeah.
I'll be
Well, I completely agree. It's as if like the understanding of it has not caught up with the prevalence of it. So, I think we can all agree that we're seeing an increasing trend towards endurance sports and an increasing trend towards thinking more about our diet and potentially not getting the right information because in the age of social media, we are following influencers over scientists because it's more accessible to absorb a TikTok video than it is to read a research paper. And we aren't providing the support around it. So, it is pretty shocking when I'm trying to deliver this message to a room full of coaches and I'm sort of met with blank stares because we all should be far further ahead than we are. But I think the researchers have actually compared this to the concussion crisis, which is a great analogy because for decades they knew that it wasn't ideal to be hit on the head in contact sports, but no one was like doing anything about it. And it's the same with this. We all know that hopefully we know that it's not that normal to have a stress fracture, but we're not doing anything about it.
yeah.
Well, you are. But how crazy is it that you guys you're not normal, and that is incredible. People who see you are incredibly lucky, but why aren't all strength and conditioning coaches informed about this? They really should be.
Those that have done the work. They've done the homework. They've either experienced it, they've become aware of it, they've related to it in some way. They've got clients that they've gone, oh, okay, there's symptoms, there's and even coaches, running coaches, triathlon coaches. There's numerous I've spoken to over the years who are very, very aware of it. There's numerous in the local community here. But again, it's information. They're gathering information, but they don't know how to then implement it. Like for us, it's like it's education. It's like right, like this is we're constantly talking about different aspects of nutrition, energy management, and recovery because it's just holistic. It's a great way of it's a logical way of training someone. You just need to be managing those different variables. But most of the time, it's just training. Like, hey, turn up at the track, turn up at the pool, turn up at for the ride for the morning ride, and let's just crack on. Let's get the sessions in and done. And most people are just prescribing exercise and instructing exercise, and they're not coaching. Coaching is coaching is I don't know. I like to think it's in the word, but you've got to be coaching all elements of that person. Like how's nutrition this week? How's recovery this week? How's stress this week? Where's your head at this week? Cool, we're good. Let's crack on then. About it. Is that an
Yeah, it's that
ellipsis?
the person-centered approach to coaching, which is fantastic. It's what we all need to be doing. It's not rocket science. It's looking at the person beyond just the athlete or the training that they do. And I think people are afraid of it. I think because of things like eating disorders, which are complex and pretty scary for any coach to try and handle, people are shying away from any kind of conversation around nutrition or menstrual health. And that's such a shame.
The reason I have such confidence in this space personally is because I've got a team around me and I've got outlets that I know like great, like I don't have to worry about it in a weird way. Like it's like I think you said earlier on, like you're a facilitator of, I'm here to help someone, and it's like if I need to they need to get a blood test, they need to have a better conversation with another professional. If it is more of an eating disorder situation or more of a psychological help they need, that's okay, because therapy should be, it has become more widely available. And again, there's just different levels to it. Nutritional, same thing. I'm not a dietitian, but I'm going to identify some basic red flags and go, okay, do we need to explore this more? Yes. Just like bloods. Okay, we're not sure about this, are we? So we need to explore this. And I think there's a pressure sometimes where people feel that they need to know everything, and if they can't know everything, then they just ignore it. And it's like, no, like just increase your professional network. Like just have a
Yeah,
better network. Like, I think that's
that's
the
exactly it. That's exactly it. And I think through the project, I'm trying to take the legwork out of this. I'm trying to make it so that the coach, all they need to do is say, okay, here's a website, go there, and you'll find what you need to find. But I think coaches are too afraid to open the conversation at all because they're going to have to then make a diagnosis. That's not their job.
no. You're just the first line of that athlete is with you because they want to, they trust you. They like you. But that position of power then is like, okay, well, help them in the best way possible. And that doesn't mean you have to solve everything that they've got going on with them. But then it's not fair because that coach might not have the aware, no, they won't know what they've got, what they can do. But all they need to do again is have that better network around them. And I can't speak enough about, you need to have that network. Like more so than anything, it's the most powerful thing you can have. Like I have a great team around us here at SFE where I don't know, such and such does, and if we don't know, then we'll find out. We'll find someone who does know. And like as I say, it's a very isolated dog eat dog world sometimes. Coaching, I think it's like it can be very isolating, and when you speak to a lot of coaches, and it doesn't need to be. Like you you
It
can
really doesn't.
you can be a very good athlete. You can be very good at training someone, but you don't have to diagnose injuries and give them nutritional plans and everything else. Like that's something it could be facilitated elsewhere. But
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time here, Pip, because I say I could go on talking all day for you. But in terms of the people, I don't want to call them athletes, but highly active people listening, people that are athletically minded. In terms of having better conversations around this, like breaking these just kind of exploring this within themselves, men, women, young, old. Is it just a matter of kind of getting in touch, or and do you have any kind of advice, from your previous self and your current self in terms of how they can go about helping themselves?
Mm. Well, yeah, I would recommend finding a trusted resource, not to, be over promotional, but something like Project Red S, where it's evidence-based and you've got a strong, credible team of people who are in the know about this, and then using that to guide your interest in whatever it is. Is it your bone health? Is it your menstrual health? What are you concerned about? And then becoming as clued up as you can before then deciding where you need to go for support. And that might well be your GP, but ideally you'd go to that GP with some information yourself, and you might even be educating them. You might have to take the Red S diagnostic criteria with you, and an idea of what blood tests they need to be looking at. You've got to be an active participant in this because you cannot just sit back and expect them to know when they don't. And I think that's what I did. I was like, oh, well, I've ticked the box of going to my GP and they said I'm fine. So I'm fine. I used that to fuel this denial that there was anything really the matter. And I think deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And so if you're sitting there listening and you're thinking, yeah, something isn't quite right, act on that. And whether that's sending an email to a doctor that you've been recommended, or if it's texting your coach and saying, in all honesty, I'm worried about my nutrition, just send it in a moment of bravery, and then, use the support around you to follow through with getting the support that you need.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Love it. Yeah,
Because
cool.
it is hard. No, it's
Oh,
so hard. Oh, it is, as you say, much easier to just put your head down and keep training. And that's what I did. And I didn't know any better, but you can know better. So use that.
yeah. No, I paused there because I just know I've seen how hard it is. Like I've seen it in my own living room, in my on I've had so I know how hard it is to kind of work through the psychology of it. Like it's the culture behind it, your behaviors behind it, your identity. We're so strongly tied to so much of it that you're not. It's just hard to step outside of that. But you've got to also. That's I guess when you lean back into the science of it, the logic of it, and go, look, the signs aren't. As a woman, we want to have a regular menstrual cycle. Like we now when we look at your blood health and your hormonal health, like it 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 doesn't. We only look at that because it's going to tell us kind of what we need to know. Like, okay, if such and such isn't where they need to be, the levels, then what do we need to do about it? We need to fuel a bit better. We need to have better nutrition, or we need to recover more, or we need to. It just you need to lean into the science or the facts a little bit. And if you're not someone who has any of that data at the moment, that could be a great thing to do is go and get some information like about yourself, like because then it will kind of tell you exactly what you need to know, and then you can kind of move forward with it. But yeah, it's not easy. But I said, yeah, take action. I think that's amazing, amazing advice. But
Mm. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, as I say, I think people are very lucky to be in your hands because not every strength and conditioning team understand this, and that's crazy, but it's the reality we're working with. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this, you're the lucky ones.
yeah, I know it's just, I think it's just a message we've always talked about. But it's so when with the work we do, people don't need to be in trouble or struggling. It's actually just it's part of we can all be guilty of it at times where we just kind of do more than we love doing. Love to run, ride, swim, whatever it is, and we just end up doing way too much at times, and we just get caught in that trap sometimes. But no, cool, Pip. Thank you very much. Yeah, and as I said, we'll very much champion a bit Red S, that's for sure, and certainly keep doing what you're doing. It'd be great.
Yeah, you too, and I've no doubt we'll be in touch about next steps because I think when you find someone who's equally passionate about changing sport for the better, and it's like in the film Concussion when they say if you know, you must tell. It's the exact same. Once you're invested in this and you've had personal experience, whether that's directly or indirectly through someone you care about, it's something you got to talk about. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Definitely. All right. Thanks, Pip.
Thank you so much. All right, speak soon.